6.8% from 6.6% recorded in May 2026. This means that on average, prices of goods and services increased by 6.5% between June 2025 and June 2026. And this development was mainly attributed to price movements in both food and non-food items. The annual food inflation decreased to 6.7% from 6.9% recorded in May 2026, and this is mainly on account of price movements in cereals, that is breakfast mielie meal, roller mielie meal, maize grain, samp, rice loco, wheat plain, household flour, as well as price movements in fresh milk, sugar, cooking oil, and eggs.
She further explains that both food and non-food inflation contributed to the overall slowdown in price increases, with food inflation easing while non-food inflation also recorded a slight decline.
The annual non-food inflation increased to 6.0% in the month of June from 6.1% recorded in May 2026. And this was mainly on account of price movements in the purchase of motor vehicles such as Toyota Hilux, Toyota Corolla Cross, Nissan Navara, as well as price movements in fuel, that is petrol and diesel, and price movements in passenger transport by air, that is Lusaka to London via Dubai, and accommodation, specifically single room, 3 and 5 star. We move on to the monthly inflation rate, and the overall monthly inflation rate was recorded at 0.1% in June 2026, moving from 0.2% recorded in May 2026.
With inflation continuing to decline like this, Zambia is now headed towards more predictable price movements, which may offer some relief to households and businesses. Reporting for Crown TV News in Lusaka, Chanda Mwango.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Royal Breakfast Show. And of course, we're just updating you with regards to how the rate of inflation has now dropped to 6.5%. And to help us understand what this actually means, joining us in studio is economist Mr. Calvin Chisanga. Mr. Calvin, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. My pleasure being here.
Now, Mr. Calvin, as you might have seen, the rate of inflation has dropped to 6.5%. But for a Zambian citizen who immediately thinks that the cost of prices or the rate of commodities is going to drop immediately, please help us understand how this directly correlates to that.
Okay, so the aspect of inflation, it's usually misunderstood. Beginning point is that inflation basically just gives you an idea in which the speed at which some of the items will be able to move at. It not just basically look at the aspect of making reduction substantially from there. Obviously, it creates a level of predictability for some of the items that we normally buy at household level. For example, mini meal, you see, it could have gone as far as 320 at some point, but it has been slowly coming down with the rate of inflation. Today we're talking about the mini meal around 175, 200, within that band. So this entails to say that even for a longer period of time, for example, maybe 2-3 months from now, we'll still be able to contain within that pricing range. It's not going to have that sharp jump that we can actually be able to see, or changing from time to time. So the inflation that is working out right now is just basically giving that clipping pricing effect, meaning whatever you buy today might be even the same range next week, or it may have just a small change of some sort, but the change won't be a big margin. That's what this inflation is working out. And just overall, the inflation is going to tutor around this normal stabilization of some sort because of the agriculture harvest that we have, which is quite strong. So this implies even to say that agriculture is playing a biggest part into this. And remember, when you go into the consumer pricing index, food inflation occupies a largest component. It's the one that carries a largest weight on the basket. Meaning, what will happen in this case, or what is actually taking place in this case, that as long as we've got this positive agriculture production, we'll still contain inflation. So meaning inflation is being fed from agriculture output. Yes.
And now moving on to one of the most interesting conversations with regards to what Honorable Brian Mundubile had to say with regards to the foreign reserves and potentially removing some so that he can help the people of society. When people normally hear reports about Zambia's foreign exchange reserves increasing or decreasing, but what exactly are reserves and why do they matter to an ordinary Zambian citizen?
Thank you so much, Ndashi. You have really brought up a very interesting topic, especially when it comes to the aspect of macroeconomic environment variables. When you look at the aspect of foreign exchange reserves, as well as the aspect of public debts, these are not synonymously. They differ in their own functionality and conditionality as well. So maybe just to some extent, I would break down with regards the reserves. Obviously, we understand that at very personal level, we normally have what we call savings, savings account and all that. So it's the same thing with the Zambia's economic structure in terms of financial, buffering system. What we basically use to save or to have as a national security on finance, it's the reserve. So the reserve acts as like our soldier, our country on the financial side. So for supposing Zambia goes to civil war today, that reserve is what is going to keep us without going to the outside market to go and beg for help or anything. Before any help could come, that reserve will be able to save us for a period of time. Like in the case of today, we've got about 6.7 billion US dollars. This implies to say that we can save ourselves from any donation or any kind of intervention from outside for the maximum of about 5 months without having difficulties. But now, coming to the purpose of the reserve, it basically goes to help us on surveying the effect that can come from the external market, and also it puts a balancing act on the local currency. We may say Kwacha is being appreciating the reserves indirectly have also been able to help out to see the cause of what is happening from the Kwacha's perspective. And again, also for us to have more investors, seeing Zambia to be more attractive, the reserves have also played a part in this. So reserves play a critical part which cannot be able to be seen. But now when you come to the public debts, as I mentioned, they are not synonymous with the reserves. The public debts are justifiable when we are basically pushing those resources into productive economic activities. Meaning what we are trying to say here is that we only come to debts when the budget has been running with deficit, meaning the government spending pattern or expenditure columns are not meeting up with the maybe resources that are on the revenue side. Meaning what we see is now the aspect of going to borrow. So you cannot basically replace reserves with the payment on the debt obligation. That doesn't work out in economic principle, because it's like you've got some savings, then you want to just pay off everything. Then what do you remain with? Obviously, at some point, they can be things like COVID. How do you survive without anywhere where you're supposed to touch to, improve your economic effect? So it becomes relatively difficult. So reserves are important. Yes, even debts are important. It's not every debt that is bad. Some of the debts are inclined to infrastructure development. Others are inclined to development initiatives of some sort, which really help. So it's how you balance the two to actually work out repayment obligation. Like in the case where Zambia has been negotiating debts, where we are basically now trying to replace expensive debts with the less expensive, meaning we are going concessional from non-concessional loans. And that's the reason why you've seen the Eurobond, the buyback, and many other negotiations that have actually been taking place from that end. And now maybe the next step is to reprofile the domestic debts. Of course, that it seemed to be a tense situation, because we cannot just come to say we're going to restructure domestic debts, because we'll collapse the financial system in this country. Some debts that are domestically are inclined to the banks that are operating the market. We've got debts that NAPS has thrown into the government through government bonds and many others. So if we restructure that one, it means some people won't be able to get pensions. Some people won't get their money that they are put in fixed deposit or 10 deposits. So that's what basically plays out from there. So it's just difficult. So you just have to play on productive economic activities to pay off the debts. You cannot get the savings that you are relying on to, strengthen your external stability or your currency or any other form of cushioning to pay off the debts. It becomes really difficult. It's something that will not be able to stand, some good elements from there.
And speaking of which, how does Zambia actually build up its reserves, and what are the major sources that sort of contribute to the national savings?
Okay, so we have a baseline sector, which is the mining sector, which has actually been booming. And of course, this now even present a major opportunity for Zambia to actually accumulate even more. And also, we've got bilateral, multilateral players also who have actually been able to be playing out a critical part. Maybe one interesting component here is that the IMF really helped to buff up this reserve. I remember there must be something that we got through the SDR, and of course the mining tax receipts have also been able to help out build up from there. So it's a different kind of sources that we actually play out, especially when it comes to the aspect of how the country is working out with the external inflows through SDI and through many other interventions. So the tax formula has also been put, closer to this arrangement as well. So it's not a silver bullet for us to say we are getting from this and know that the surplus that we get from even the budget. Sometimes the budget can even be overplanned or something like that. So we have some money that are reallocated to some of these things, and they work out from there.
Very interesting. Now, economists, I'm sure you hang around a lot of economists, of course. Sometimes they talk about reserves being able to cover, several months of imports. But what does that mean? And what is generally considered a healthy reserve position for a country like Zambia?
Okay, so the aspect of building up reserves has given a shield from any financial or economic shock. That's a beginning point, meaning it's like what you have put in your life, where you've got a fixed deposit which can help you at any given time. For example, if somebody dies in your family and there's no one who has financial resources to actually help with that funeral expense, you can force yourself to go and withdraw that money and sort out your problem. And it's very expensive, even just for argument's sake, dying in Lusaka. You have to spend roughly about maybe 25,000 kwacha on average for you to just find maybe coughing, feeding people and all that. So now imagine there's no one and you've got a saving. So that's what this saving can actually be able to help. But now in terms of just looking at how certain things work out as regard to your question, it's basically works in such a way that when you look at the 5 months of import cover, meaning when you see the reserve depreciated to maybe say 1.5 billion of US dollar, we had issues to do with the kwacha performance, meaning we could not be able to stretch ourselves to go with the aspect of trying to put things in perspective. So now what I'm trying to put in across here is that the reserves hold the hopes of the external market, because instead of us going to look for more dollars to buy and all that, we spend our own money to do things like that. So what basically plays out here is that the reserves are there to actually help us have the internal flow of dollar, meaning we are not going to have the high demand on dollar. Maybe I can also just give you a typical example or methodological way of reasoning. when there is high demand on dollar, it means we are creating kwacha to depreciate. When there is an equal balance of demand, dollar and kwacha, then we are stabilizing. If we have high supply of dollar in the market, then kwacha will start appreciating. I don't know if I'm trying to put things in perspective. So it's like if we have less dollar, then we'll create a situation where kwacha will start depreciating, meaning we have so much high demand on dollar. So we have to balance up those things. So that's the reason why we seem to have this good atmosphere. And again, if you look at the further implication, when we have less dollar, in the market, what will happen that will now have a high cost of doing business, because the Bank of Zambia will come and start caving the inflation through monetary policy rate. Meaning what will happen in the case now is that the monetary policy rate in the case will start now, filtering through the aspect of interest rate. Because when they touch on the monetary policy rate instrument, they are talking to say we are increasing the value of or the cost of borrowing. And that is very, very difficult for us to actually even drive productive activities from that perspective. So we need to balance up the key actors from there. So it's interconnected even to the SME, it's interconnected to a lot of other stuff within the economy. So it's something that is not just a standing alone aspect. So it's like what the head or the brain works with. If the brain is not functioning, the legs can't also function. So it's well connected to all these systems. So the formulation of financial market requires that we need to have savings that can be able to help us change the narrative. When you look at just the import effect, Zambia, as in some instances, as being having an imported inflation component in whatever we're importing. So with the kind of situation that we are building up, we are trying to build local processing, meaning we need the capacity for exporting competitiveness. We need also the market to just be blown up with the capital formation, and this is quite linked to that situation as well.
So basically, essentially what you are explaining is the fact that the reason why we're seeing that the dollar has been dropping, or it has dropped to 17, is because at the moment there isn't really a high demand for the dollar at the moment.
Yes. So there are also other policy instruments that have actually been instituted by the Bank of Zambia. I'm sure you've read from December last year, where Bank of Zambia passed a policy to say we should not be using dollar for transaction in the local market. So that has given birth also to the situation, meaning even the accumulation of the reserve has also come from there, because we're not putting so much pressure on the dollar in the market for settlement and many other, payment channels. Yes.
Now, looking ahead, what practical steps can Zambia actually take to strengthen its reserves and make the economy more resilient to the global shocks?
Okay, so we need to strengthen now agriculture diversification, export diversification. We need to work on energy security, ensuring that we have proper reforms that should be able to help gravitate to the highest level of production, because energy has been one of the key challenging, which is even still hidden factor right now as we speak. And again, we need also to look at policies that should be able to speak of growth in the SME, and enterprise development as well. We need to foster strong fortitude of commitment toward the healthcare and education, ensuring that the skills development is something that is to the core, because we need to start producing in the country. Value addition should be the core factor. Obviously, we understand that for a long period of time, mining sector has been exporting low commodities. So it's high time. In fact, we are at the center even of supply market. Copper has been one of the key factors that is being used in energy transition or green technology. So we need to actually be able to start at least making some semi-production of, some of these raw materials from primary resource sectors. So if we tend to drive that energy and, that attention of making vertical integration in the local market and export semi-produced items or even fully finished items at full scale. I think that should be able to change the narrative. So there are a lot of things that we can actually be able to underplay. But the best important aspect here is to see that the local market gets into value addition. Once we change that aspect of production sense, I think we'll be able even to contribute competitively with the upcoming of the free trade area and many other trading blocks that we have. Much more, look at the attention that we have also in terms of having the trade corridors that are coming as well. So I think it's an important aspiration that we need to drive quickly into industrialization so that we can foster security of supply, some of the items, and again, that also helped to change the narrative on an employment situation. The reason why we seem to have a low employment situation in our scales is because we're not doing value addition, be it in agriculture, mining, and these are the key fundamental pillars that can actually be able to change things from there. So it's quite an imperative situation that we should be able to build so that we can change things from there. Yes.
Now, Mr. Chisanga, Mr. Calvin, before I do let you go, what's the key messages or the key message that you'd like every Zambian to remember about the national reserves and also the importance to our country's economic future?
Okay, the key message is that reserves for keeping to help us, save ourselves from any eventualities, whilst the debt may tend to be a productive asset if we basically push it into productive activities, meaning it's a liability, yes, but in the sense of how we use it, we can turn it into a very valuable asset that can be able to change things. Maybe just to highlight one element here, the budget at national level is funded by three levels. One, it's taxation, which you and me, I believe, if we were to start paying a lot of taxes, we'll start complaining. So to leverage ourselves from not paying too much of the taxes, we've got now another way where we're getting funding, which is donation and grants. And again, that also sometimes it appeals with the stakeholders' engagement out there. If they feel that Zambia needs to be donated with this, we get that support. And also it depends on the governance pattern that we are also cultivating. If we've got high corruption levels, we will not be able to have this coming through. Then the third one is when now we're talking about the debts issue, because obviously we've got now a ceiling under the parliamentary pass out now, where we'll be able now to see that going forward, we'll not be borrowing like the way we did, where we went on bandwagon, borrowing anyhow and from different conditionalities. Now we are more inclined to the domestic borrowing. And again, the external borrowing has got a small percentage which you have controlled. So meaning we need to fund our own projects. We need to be compliant to taxes. We need to be friendly to this country. We should not be able to see somebody outside to come and build our country. It's us who's supposed to build our country by way of actively participating in this economy. So my last word will be, these two, the debts and reserves, should not be used synonymously. They function differently. So they cannot be mixed in the way that some politicians are claiming. And again, it's important to look at whom do we vote for with regard to certain messages that are coming through. Because let the technical people explain what this means. I'm sure you cannot say inflation is useless or reserves is useless. All these are key important aspect. Even when you come to government, for example, whoever is speaking of reserves, they will have to be measured, their performance based on these parameters, on inflation, on reserves, on public debts, and all that. These are things that they will be able to be used to measure their performance in office.
Mr. Calvin Chisanga, thank you so much for joining us this morning and just educating us with regards to bank reserves.
My pleasure.
Otherwise, we did have Mr. Calvin Chisanga, who is an economist, who was just letting you in on how inflation